Good evening and welcome to Rotary Club of Wynberg's Rotary Talks Series 2021. This is our third talk of the series with Jason Van't Slot, who will thrill us away with his journey and his challenge in living with cystic fibrosis. We also welcome Terry Winship in the background, who was our first speaker and will be our Zoom technologist tonight. And she'll make sure the presentation is recorded and edited and available on our YouTube channel, as well as our social media platforms for those who would like to rewatch this and share it with their friends, the story. Before introducing tonight's host, I wish to share a few Rotary announcements. Today being World Earth Day, Rotary Foundation has recognized supporting the environment as a seventh new area of focus. This will add additional funding from Rotary Foundation to projects dedicated to environmental project impacts, and that may help the climate crisis we find ourselves in this current situation. So hopefully through this initiative, Rotary Wynberg will join this cause and look for environmental projects to do. This past Saturday, Wynberg Rotary partnered with Square Hill Primary Early Act, and we did a lovely tree planting project. We planted 11 Cape Ash Kerbooms, as well as we planted a water-wise garden in the school's driveway. And that would promote environmental impact, addressing the carbon footprint for the learners, ensuring that they understand their role in the future of their community's environment. And then also we're going to, this Saturday, Rotary 9400 District and Africa celebrates Rotary Centenary, 100 years of Rotary in Africa. So that's a proud moment for all of us who are Rotarians to know that that has been happening for 100 years, founded in Johannesburg. Then, so further ado, I'm not going to chat anymore on Rotary, which you're all welcome to follow us on wynbergrotary.org.za and our Facebook pages and find more how you can join Rotary. So further ado, I wish to welcome tonight's host and founder of founding member of High Impact Public Speaking, the big positive guy, Andre du Toit.
Thanks very much there, Justin, and what a pleasure to be back at another Rotary meeting at Wynberg. As you said, this is our third presentation. I think we've got another one left as well. We were very fortunate this week in that it was arranged by Justin that the Weekend Argus has now got hold of us and wants to know a little bit more about the Rotary Talk. So we were just chatting a little bit about the Rotary Club, about high impact public speaking. But maybe for just a little bit of background is that Justin and I have actually been working together for several years when he was doing his work with Interact. And one of the things we were doing is helping with the development of the leaders of Interact. And this is where we've actually created our bond, where we started going about and setting about teaching young people to speak. Now, this has grown into 4 companies, and what you're seeing tonight is another one of the speakers from our professional course. These are people that literally go out and make money out of speaking. And what we've done is that we as High Impact Public Speaking have committed ourselves to Rotary to providing world-class speakers so that you guys can enjoy them and just be inspired and just be motivated, and also hopefully generate some interest in Rotary. So I hope you're going to enjoy tonight. For those of you that signed up a little bit earlier, you may have heard we were playing a song, and there was a very deliberate reason for it. If you love your music, that was called I Lived by One Republic, one of the top bands in the world. But what I'd love you to do is, if you've got your YouTube finger ready when you finish, go ahead and look again at that song, I Lived, and watch the music video, because it's interesting that this enormous band actually made a music video and dedicated this song to cystic fibrosis. And what they do is they tell the story of a young 15-year-old with cystic fibrosis, a guy by the name of Brian Wernicke, and an incredibly emotional experience and a music video telling you but what it's like to live with cystic fibrosis and embracing life at the same time, despite this awful disease. And that's what I think you're going to hear tonight. I think Jason is going to tell you a story, not of pain and suffering. And he always shouts at me when I say he suffers from cystic fibrosis, and he says, I don't suffer. I just happen to have it. So I think you're going to be inspired tonight by this amazing young man. A few household quickly tips. The first thing is, if you find the internet is wobbly, it's not us, it's you. We're running off a 200 megabyte line with a server, so it is absolutely going fast. If for whatever reason you feel you're wobbling, your internet is wobbly, please turn your video off, and that'll enable some more internet speed to come through your side. But you're quite welcome to switch it on. It is being recorded, so if you haven't paid your alimony or you're behind in your taxes and you're a bit fearful and stuff like that, this is a good time to turn off your video. And what else is there that I can tell you about this evening? I'll tell you a little bit of next month. We've got another amazing speaker lined up, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that after Jason's presentation. Jason is a young man who has impressed me from the minute that I've met him. He came to one of our first graduation ceremonies for high impact public speaking, and he came up to me almost immediately and said, I want to do this. I want to be one of these guys on the stage because I believe I have a story to tell. And wow, what a story he has to tell. He has now been with us for several years. He is an integral member of high impact public speaking. But what inspires me is this young man's desire to make a difference and literally to live the words of that song and to live every single day. He's turned out to be a bit of a legend because a disease that normally should debilitate you has not done this to him. We know he struggles, and there are times that he's really, really struggling. But what I'm always amazed at is the number of times we've had him presenting from my hospital bed. In fact, he was very nearly in hospital this week. And we had to fight with him and say, don't present from your hospital bed. You're sick, take a break. But we're very, very fortunate now. He's had some good medicines and he's well again. I don't want to tell you too much of his detail because it's all part of his story, but ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to welcome Jason Van't Slot. He's an incredible young man.
I woke up this morning with this terrible fight that was going on inside of me. It was a fight between these two wolves. The one, he was evil. He was envy, self-pity, self-doubt, and resentment. The other wolf was good. He was happiness, humility, love, compassion, and hope. Now, this same fight goes on inside of everybody. But the question is, which wolf will win? The wolf that you choose to feed. Look, life, it's not easy and it's tough. Before entering this world, nobody gets to choose the cards that they're dealt, not even David Copperfield. I was brought into this world with a lung condition called cystic fibrosis, which causes an accumulation of mucus all over your lungs, and it doesn't seem that terrifying until you realize that it's not only your lungs, but it's every single organ in your body, and it slowly causes them to malfunction and fail. Predominantly, it does affect your lungs. And what happens is this thick mucus, it forms like a breeding ground of bacteria in your lungs, and it lives in this thick mucus. So if you were to imagine breathing in and filling your lungs up with syrup, and then breathing out and having this thick residue of syrup lining your lungs, and it's like breathing through that residue. What also happens is that slowly it has a catalytic effect on all your organs as well. And this brings quite a short life expectancy to the condition. I'm currently 25 years old, and the life expectancy for this condition is 37. When I was young, my parents, they treated me very differently to most people. And when I have a twin sister, and she doesn't have cystic fibrosis, but I do. But I never really asked this question, why do I have the condition but not her? And the reason why I never really asked this question is because we have a family motto that says, don't give it power. Don't give the power to control you. And it's going back to that same question of which wolf are you choosing to feed? I was about 3 years old when my dad, he gave me a hiding because I made up this excuse that I couldn't do something trivial like handle my sister's toy. And I made up this excuse that I can't do it because I was sick. And he chose to give me a hiding and said that I was never allowed to use CF as an excuse. And this has been the building block to how I choose to live my life. 1 month before my 20th birthday, my parents let it slip that I was given the life expectancy of 10 years old. And I say that they let it slip because they knew of other people with CF who were so set on making it to their 21st birthday. And they did make it, but then they died soon after. And I didn't know this, so I never had my own targeted life expectancy. In fact, my parents didn't even tell me that it was a life-threatening condition. And they only told me that it was life-threatening when I was 15 years old and I'd cultured a bacterial lung infection. And this infection still hasn't left my lungs. It's something that I live with daily. But what they did do is they made sure that I met someone by the name of Peter, who has had a double lung transplant. He still lives a full life. He has a family and is in his 60s. The reason why my parents did this is that they wanted me to see that Peter was living with the condition and not a victim to it. He was a victor of the condition. And this showed me that there's not only light at the end of the tunnel, but that there's life at the end of the tunnel. Meeting Peter, it showed me that cystic fibrosis doesn't have to be a death sentence if you don't give it the power to limit you and you don't let it consume you. And yes, it is not a great condition at all, but you can live with it and you can manage it to your best abilities, and you can still live a great life despite having adversities. I was in my final year of schooling when I was talking to my childhood friend, and we were discussing what our futures were for after school and our plans. And in the conversation, I told him that I was planning to do the Cape Epic, which is the toughest mountain biking race in the world. And I told him that when I completed it, it would be a world's first for cystic fibrosis. He turned to me and he said to me, I completely forgot that you ever had CF. We all know Table Mountain, right? That's the big flat rock in the middle of the city. So the height of Table Mountain is 1,000 meters, and I'm going to use this as our unit of measure. So the Argus Cycle Tour, it covers the distance of 100 kilometers around the Cape Peninsula, and the total accumulated climbing in that entire race is also 1,000 meters. So basically the height of Table Mountain. Then on the other side of the spectrum, there's the Cape Epic. This is an 8-day gauntlet where you're going through rocks and mud and cheap track and soft sand. It's basically an Argus a day for a week. And during this race, you are doing every single day about 2 to 3 times the height of Table Mountain in elevation and the distance of an Argus, but it's all off-road. And now, if this doesn't sound like something that's pretty difficult, now imagine getting a straw and cycling or breathing through a straw. That is what it's like living with cystic fibrosis. The Cape Epic is a 2-man team, and I did it with a childhood friend Philip, and we went to school together. He was a German triathlete, and we entered the race, but we had a particular mission and a purpose behind it. We wanted to portray that, not that I'm a CF cyclist, but a cyclist who happens to have CF. It's actually very ironic because Philip's dad is a medical doctor and a cyclist himself. And Philip was speaking to him and said, I'm planning on doing doing the epic with a guy with cystic fibrosis. Philip's dad said to him that he was wasting his time. He said it was physically impossible for someone with cystic fibrosis to complete the Cape Epic. Now, he said this despite the fact that he actually hasn't even met me, and he lives in Germany. But he also said this because he had this preconceived idea that it couldn't be done. And this was exactly the mentality that I wanted to change behind doing the Cape Epic. Cystic fibrosis, it's a long process of struggles and working through these struggles. So the fact that I was healthy enough to even participate or even think of participating in the Cape Epic was a huge victory just in itself. So I was very fortunate as a young child to be diagnosed at 8 months. And this meant that this early diagnosis, I could manage my health. We knew what we were dealing with, and we could prevent frequent lung infections. As this is a progressive disease, that the mucus that has bacteria that I mentioned earlier, it causes frequent infections, and it gets to the point where those infections cause permanent lung damage, and you can't use that part of your lung anymore. And many people in South Africa are misdiagnosed for other conditions, such as TB or other respiratory issues, and not CF, and they have this lung damage, which happens in the early stages of their life. I found that doing exercise and having CF, they worked very well together. If you were to think just the positioning on the bike, you're leaning over and you're opening up your lungs and getting air in. It's a form of postural drainage to get the mucus out, but also the vibrations of cycling and on a mountain bike helps loosen that phlegm. But as I was a young child and I wasn't able to do sport, a lot of the onus was on my parents to having to do lots of physiotherapy twice a day and get that mucus out of my lungs when I was a young baby. And as I got older, I started doing more sport and I could do some bit more myself. But that didn't mean that all the responsibilities were gone. I mean, it's your parents after all. So when I have a play date with a snotty-nosed kid or something, my mom would get, she would get quite stressed and shivers would go down her spine, because for me, I would think, oh, I just can't play with my friend. And I'll be worried about, the missed time playing with friends. Whereas my mom, going in her brain, she's thinking, well, if I were to get sick from this other kid, it's not just a cold. It will most likely end up me being on antibiotics because I can't cough up the mucus. So it just sits there and the bacteria grows and gets worse. And it can lead to me having to go into IV antibiotics in hospital. And once again, that scars your lungs and you can't use that lung damage, that damaged part of your lungs ever again. And also, there was many things that my parents had to look out for and manage risks. So, for example, things that people would take for granted, like going into hot tubs or going into stables. These are areas where there's hot, warm areas where pathogens thrive, and these will be at risk for me picking up different pathogens and bacteria. So there was a lot of risk analysis happening in the background in terms of what I should do in just to, as a young child, which many people completely overlook. There's many other CF challenges that I faced not only on every day, but in particular in relation to the Cape Epic. So firstly, with CF, you lose 4 times more salt when you sweat. And this isn't great for an endurance sport like cycling, because this causes cramping. So in order to get over this, purposely, I would go train in December at midday in 35-degree heat to get used to these hot conditions, and also experiment with different salt supplements to make sure that I wouldn't cramp. And often when I come back from a ride, I've got this layer of salt lining my skin, and it looks like I'm a shiny vampire in the sun. So that's one of the factors, but there's several other which I'm going to go on to now. And your digestive system also gets affected. So this thick mucus, it's not only in your lungs, but it's in your entire body. So your digestive system gets affected because this thick mucus blocks your ducts, and the bile and the enzymes can't get your food. So you don't actually absorb what you eat. So you only absorb about 25% of what you eat. And that is all great and well, but that's only when you have the assistance of artificial enzymes, which I have to take whenever I eat on the bike as well. So with the Cape Epic, you cycling anywhere between 180 to 150 kilometers each day. You have to feel for that, and it's an endurance sport. So there's a saying, you don't eat for today, you eat for tomorrow. So my day would start with me waking up at 5:30 and having a buffet-sized breakfast, getting on the bike at about 7 o'clock for the actual race. And every half an hour while I was racing, I would have a energy bar or a gel, and with that, enzymes, and then washing down those enzymes with a high-carb drink with electrolytes to replace the lost salts. And you'll do that for every half an hour for 7 to 8 hours a day. Come back off the bike around 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and immediately have a high-protein recovery drink, a huge recovery meal, and then 2-3 hours later, you're going having a supper with another buffet supper, and enzymes with that as well. After that, you get into your tent and you're busy preparing all your food for the next day. So it was a matter of fighting against this calorie deficit and completely focusing on a fueling schedule to make sure that I had enough sustenance to get me through it. Often people ask me how I got through the Epic, and literally I got through it bite by bite. I went through about 1 month's worth of enzymes in a week. So that's just a reference to how much I actually ate. Another factor is that you don't get all the vitamins you need because you don't absorb all your food. And some of them are essential vitamins, but one of them is vitamin K, which is responsible for clotting your blood. So one of my doctor's biggest concerns was not my lungs, but actually that I would fall and start bleeding out and have to get medical assistance with a helicopter to like get out of this. Literally, you're on the middle of the mountain. So that was his biggest concern. Also, it's not uncommon for me to be cycling or just doing anything, like sitting in my room and suddenly start coughing up about a quarter of a cup of blood. It's a sign that there's an underlying infection. So that's one of the challenges that people often see in public, and they get quite nervous, and you have to reassure them, no, this is fine, this is normal, when it doesn't look normal at all. As CF is a progressive disease, as more organs start malfunctioning, it becomes a catalyst for other issues. one of these issues is cystic fibrosis related diabetes. So it's not type 1 or type 2. It's its own type of diabetes that's caused by pancreatic insufficiency. So my pancreas doesn't work properly. And I view my diabetes as that I'm in a car driving in 3rd gear, but I should be in 5th gear. And I'm using long-acting insulin to get some smooth shifting and rapid-acting insulin to get me to actually change gears properly at the right time or select the correct gear. So think of it as everybody's busy driving around in automated Google Drive cars, which has a designated route so nobody crashes. But then there's me busy driving a little skadonk and slipping gears and crashing all the time with a map on my steering wheel trying to find where I'm going. So all these gear slipping and crashes comes in the forms of sugar highs and sugar lows. And what this feels like, it's you almost drunk in a way, and you have to make very important decisions when going through this, such as how much insulin to inject yourself so that you don't have too high sugars. But if you overdose, you can slip into a coma. And the feeling of a sugar high or a sugar low, it's you have your lips become numb, you taste metal in your mouth, you get blurred vision, you get brain fog and confused to the point where you literally cannot think of what you're doing at that very moment. Another side effect of or catalyst from the diabetes is that your sugar levels, when they're high, this causes the bacteria in your lungs to thrive and grow. And then infections grow up, because remember, I still have that bacteria that's been in my lungs since I'm 15. So it really is a knock-on effect of one condition onto the next, to the next, to the next. Sorry. The epic, it was one of the most difficult weeks of my life. Just mentally and physically, it is extremely challenging. You're just so perpetually exhausted all the time that simple tasks become almost impossible or just difficult to get your brain to function. So you'll be sitting there putting on your shoes, and halfway through you forget what you're doing, and you have to think about, wait, well, what am I actually doing? Oh wait, I'm putting on my shoes. So that's the level of that my brain was functioning at, or lack of brain functionality. And physically, you are so depleted that you have to break things down to the extent of what are you literally doing at that very moment. So I would be going for cycling for about 4 hours, periods of 4 hours, when literally all I'm thinking about is just keeping moving. And you'll be just gritting your teeth to get through the pain and get through to that little bush over there. And you just look at that bush. And once you get there, you look at the next bush. And it's just your goal to get to the next bush. And I would find myself counting my pedal strokes, or repeating little sayings like an object in motion stays in motion, or singing Rocky to myself, just trying to get some morale going and keeping that momentum going and making sure that you continuously moving. And going through these rough moments, you'd have to think to yourself, why am I doing this? And you would say, like, I'm going through so much pain right now, but if I were to quit, I'd have to do all of it again. So I might as well just carry on and get a reward for everything that I've endured. Going into the finishing straight, it was an incredible, and it was awesome. It was almost uncomprehendable to the emotions that came through. We went down the barricades, which was lined with people all wearing orange in solidarity with cystic fibrosis, with banners and streamers, all anticipating our arrival, and with champagne, and it was an amazing experience. And I think back, and it's in disbelief, actually. I can't believe we did it. Like, at 20 years of working towards just being healthy enough to do it, and just months and months of preparation, and we actually did it. It came together. A world's first for cystic fibrosis. I started cycling by doing the Argus, like most people in Cape Town. And before the race, you go and register. And I remember seeing this this jersey on a mannequin, which had the sub-3, or a symbol of a clock and a 3 in the clock on the jersey. And my dad explained it to me that it represented a sub-3 Argus tour. And I said to my dad, one day I'm going to get a sub-3. And so we set off the next morning with not having this promise in mind at all, just with the goal of achieving my first Argus. And my dad and I dressed up as you do, and he was dressed up as Shrek, and I was dressed up as Noddy. Anyways, we got to the end of the race in just under 7 hours, which is quite off that 3-hour mark that I set myself the day before. But then the next couple of years, I would come back every single year and try and beat that time. The next year, I came back on my mom's steel bike, cycling by myself. And I remember on the drive home saying to my dad how annoyed I was and frustrated at myself that I missed doing under 4 hours by 5 minutes because there was a crash on Chapman's Peak and we had to walk for about 1 kilometer. And I remember him saying to me that I shouldn't beat myself up about it, because there's many people with CF who actually aren't able to ride a sub-4 Argus, and that I should be happy that what I had done, and I could be proud of the race that I did. Anyways, I went back, and I would go back year after year and try to cut my time closer and closer. And after the year with the wins being cancelled, I did the Stellenbosch tour, but I hadn't trained because the Argus was cancelled, and that was my motivation to train. And I did it with a friend from varsity, and he dropped me like a stone within the first couple meters on the first climb. And I got quite disparaged that he was doing so well and I was doing so badly, and I knew that we were on the same level, but I was untrained. Unfortunately, he got a puncture, which prevented him from finishing in the top 10 of the race, but we finished together 30th and 31st. And I should have been quite happy because it's quite a good place, but I realized that I wasn't fulfilling my own potential, and I could have done a lot better. The words of Steve Prefontaine, they ring very true in this situation. To sacrifice the gift, to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. And I realized that I was sacrificing relatively good health. I was sacrificing the time in varsity to train. And this was not something that I should be so willingly giving this gift away. I then dedicated the next 9 months to trying to give the sub-3 another go, where I dedicated all my races with the idea of improving my start time into groups closer and closer to the pros. with the idea that I would be able to get a fast enough group because they matched abilities when doing the seeding for the racing, whereas the group were able to help me to get sub-3. On the start line of the actual race, on the Good Hope, next to the Good Hope Castle, you could sense there was this tension in the air. The weather was great, and everybody knew that sub-3s were on the cards. Behind me were the racing tandems, so I'd managed to get my start time up to my racing age group. So I knew there was a very good chance of getting the sub-3. It was now or never. As the sun arose, the gun went off and we shot off down the M3 like frenzied bees coming through UCT. And as we came past UCT, there was this anxious tension. And suddenly there was a crash. And you could just hear slamming brakes, screeching carbon. And I realized just like that, 9 months of training could just be obliterated, just gone. As we got to Smiths and the road pitched skywards and the pace started increasing, everybody was attacking, I started falling back and further back down the group. And this imaginary elastic was starting to snap. And I knew that I had to stay in the group to be able to do the sub-3. As this elastic was snapping, I looked back and I was the last person in the group. There was no one there. I put my head down and I sprinted and gave it everything I had, because I knew that if I gave up there, I might as well just go home and pull out when I get past my house. As I crested the climb on the coattails of the group, I glanced down at my Garmin and I saw that we were on target for 2 hours 50. I was busy riding way above my potential. As we got into Nurtuk, there was a crash on a traffic island, and I slammed so hard on my brakes that the actual tire shifted on my rim, snapping off the valve. So I'd punctured, and I knew that I had to fix this puncture ASAP. As I was busy fixing the puncture, I was thinking to myself, I'm so glad that the night before I packed a spare tube and a pump, because I was thinking, I might as well save the weight, but if I do get a puncture, at least I can finish the race and just clock another finish. As I was busy fixing the puncture, there was a bystander, and he was busy relaying what was happening, how many tandems had gone past. And then I looked down and I saw the tape, the rim tape around the tape and the hole. It had shifted as well, and it covered the hole where the tire would have to go. I quickly started frantically grabbing for an Allen key or sticks to stab and pierce this rim tape so I could change the puncture. At the same time, my Garmin was an auto pause. So I had no idea how much time had actually passed. And as soon as I fixed the puncture, it was a moment when I was battling with those two wolves again. Do I then just give up and say it's over? Mathematically, the sub-3 is done. I can come back another year. Or do I race with my heart on my sleeve and give it absolutely everything I have? And being at the place that I was and I punctured, there was still the two toughest climbs, Suikerbos and Chappies, left. For the next hour, I absolutely gave it everything. I buried myself. I crossed the finish line with vision blurred, coughing and spluttering, gob everywhere on the pavement. And as I pulled out my asthma pump, you could see the marshals anxiously looking around for medical assistance. I was completely gone, spent. I buried myself, died 1,000 deaths. And I had given everything. I had fulfilled my own potential up to that point. I went to a place with some friends and who after the race, and while we were chatting, my friend got an SMS confirming that he had got a sub-3 and he started in the same group as me. Now I'd punctured, so I was no longer in that group. I didn't get the SMS. I started thinking, was there a fault in my timing chip? Did it fall off? And as I went to go check, he started looking up my name in the provisional results, knowing that I was going for a sub 3. When I came back, he found my name and he didn't say anything. He just handed me the phone. Did he not want to be the bearer of bad news? I looked down and I burst into tears. 8 years of dreaming. I'd finally fulfilled the promise to myself. I'd finished a sub 3 as the first person with cystic fibrosis to do so. I'd fulfilled my potential as a cyclist and achieved that dream. After hearing about these two particular achievements that I've done, people always ask me, what's next? Or why do you do these things and put yourself through these immensely physically draining and demanding challenges that most people in their right mind would never even consider doing. And I can't answer the what and the why independently. I'm not the first person with CF to attempt to do an Everesting. And this is my next challenge, is to do an Everesting attempt. It's fiendishly simple, but it's brutally hard. It is the toughest hill climb challenge in the world. Simply, you choose any hill in the world and you cycle multiple repeats up and down until you reach the accumulated height of Everest. So this is 9 vertical kilometers or 9 table mountains. There's no time limit, but you're not allowed to sleep when doing this. I'm not the first person with CF to attempt an Everesting, and I'm not the first person with CF to achieve an Everesting. There's a German triathlete who goes by the alias of Willi, who attempted to do an Everesting, and he failed after cycling for 14 hours continuously and falling 2 kilometers short of the height of Everest. He then said this is beyond his abilities. It cannot be done with someone with cystic fibrosis. Then 2 months later, he was put on trial basis for a drug called Trikafta, which corrects the underlying cause of CF. And what it does is it restores the way the CFTR membrane functions. So basically it helps on a cellular level, helps you function properly so that you do not have the symptoms of the condition anymore. You still have it, but the symptoms are no longer there, or they are dramatically reduced. Willi started on this drug, and he said to me that he started going through this thing called a purge. So what happens is this drug makes your mucus thinner throughout your entire body, and it corrects that defect in the gene. It makes the mucus thin, and you start coughing up years of green dormant mucus, and it's easily expelled out your lungs. And he said that this started happening to him within hours of taking the first tablet. And he was in his 40s when he started this. And he said that the next morning he woke up and the chronic cough that he'd had for 40 years was non-existent within 24 hours. 2 months after Trikafta, he attempted the Everesting and he succeeded. And he finished the Everesting in 17 hours and 20 minutes. Now, Willi will be granted lifetime access to this drug, Trikafta, because he did it on trial basis. But this is not the case for everyone. And the market value for this drug is 6 million rand for one patient for treatment for 1 year. Now, I'm planning to do an Everesting on Tull Monument. So I'll be cycling up Toll Monument for 58 times. And during the race, I'm going to be wanting to do it to raise money for Trikafta, which I'll touch on shortly. But as I'm trying to break the record, I'm not going to be stopping much. I'm going to plan to basically cycle for 17 hours straight without stopping and not be assisted by Trikafta. I do not have this drug. I will be stopping for less than 5 minutes just to check my blood sugar levels and eat. This is the why to my next challenge. This drug is the why behind doing the Everesting is to help raise funds for a campaign run by the South African Cystic Fibrosis Association. They are currently in ongoing negotiations with the pharmaceutical company, Medical Aids, and the Medical Advisory Board to bring this drug here at a hugely discounted rate because of the economic status of South Africa. And these negotiations have been successful in other countries such as Australia and Canada. So it has been done. And while I'll be doing my 58 repetitions, I'm going to be dedicating each repetition to an individual in South Africa with cystic fibrosis. I know of people who are my age who passed away this year, who passed away and they're younger than me. And I'm pretty sure that they would still be here if they had this drug. I have friends who are on the transplant list, and not only are they exercising on oxygen, but they are living on oxygen. And this drug literally would allow them to breathe for the first time unrestricted. Life on Trikafta has been described as unlocking a superpower. And this feeling of unlocking a superpower, in reality, it's not a superpower. It's breathing unrestricted for the first time in your life. An American cyclist, Connie Carpenter Finney, she summed up her why to why she does extreme sports very well, and this relates to me very well as well. I'm going to read her particular quote. Apologies. Okay. The why that relates to why I'm doing the Everesting and why Connie says that she does endurance sports. It's a privilege to be able to choose how you suffer. Not everybody is able to choose this. Some people have pain forced upon them. When I'm going to be doing these repetitions, I'm going to be thinking back to the reason and the why I'm doing it, and remind myself that I am choosing to cycle up a mountain for 17 hours because I have friends who don't have that choice. And I'm choosing to do something about it to give them a choice. I'm not defined by CF. I am defined by the mindset that my parents created around CF. Despite CF, I finished in the top 3% of the August Cycle Tour, beating 25,000 able bodies, even with the puncture and reduced lung function. Despite CF, I completed the Cape Epic, the Tour de France of mountain biking. Despite CF, I am choosing to live out my what, my why, and my privilege. every single day as growing up, my parents had made a choice when I was a child, and I make that same choice every single day. And I still make this choice. And I urge you to make this exact same choice. Are you choosing to fulfill your own potential, or are you choosing to sacrifice the gift? Are you choosing to give anything less than your best? Are you choosing to live your privilege? Are you choosing to feed that correct wolf?